What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast, Mass Media Hysteria. It is June 13th. It is a Sunday. My name is Court. I will be your host for the duration. With me, as always, is Chris.
How's it going, everyone?
And today we're going to be talking. We've only got 3 topics today because it was kind of a dry week. But first off, we will be doing a full spoilers review of the first episode of Loki, titled "Glorious Purpose." Then we are going to jump into a full spoilers review of the latest movie musical, the Lin-Manuel Miranda film. Well, he didn't direct it. It was directed by John M. Chu, but he wrote the music and lyrics. In the Heights, which is out on streaming or on demand and in theaters right now. Those are open where you are. And then to keep it to musicals, we are going to have a little discussion about our favorite and least favorite musicals. So we'll get to that. As always, want to thank you guys for watching. Would love it if you would drop a like or subscribe to this channel. It helps the video get out there, reach more people, helps the channel grow. We appreciate it very much. Obviously, if you have any thoughts on any of the topics we talk about today, hit the comments below. We'll talk about them. I do read all of the comments and I respond to as many of them as I can, so don't think your thoughts are going unread. And finally, we want to remind you guys that if you don't have time to watch a 90-minute YouTube video, our podcasts are up on some podcasting services right now, like Spotify and Google Podcasts. We're working towards getting some more of those coming soon. So definitely check us out there if that's more your speed. All of that said, I should say Andris is not here this week. It is once again his bye week. He will be back next week as far as we're aware. We wish him luck on the move. So without further ado, we are going to jump into Loki, the first episode, Glorious Purpose. Chris, let me ask you off the top, what were your overall, before I get to your overall thoughts about the episode, what were you thinking going into this? Having watched WandaVision, having watched Falcon Winter Soldier, were you excited for it? Did you have thoughts and opinions going in?
Yeah, I was pretty excited about this one. This all the way back, I forget when they first kind of like showed footage for the upcoming MCU shows. This was definitely right up there. WandaVision always caught my attention because I didn't know what the hell that was going to be, and you saw weird black and white shit. So I think that was my most important, my most anticipated. But Loki was a close second because I've always loved the character ever since the first Thor movie by Kenneth Branagh. Tom Hiddleston is just great in the role, and the way that the character has just developed over the years in the MCU, he's changed in such interesting ways that the idea of having an entire show about him, it's like, yeah, I was way on board. And after seeing the first episode, I'm still on board. I think that it's kind of hitting all the marks that I was hoping it would, and we'll get into what those marks are. But yeah, I think a really solid introductory episode really gets you interested and excited to see where it goes.
Okay, now let me ask you this. I know my answer. Of the 3 Marvel shows, WandaVision, Falcon Winter Soldier, Loki, which show, I don't know if you want to rank them, but which show do you think had the strongest first episode?
It's okay. I think that there's I'll say which one I think had the kind of like the strongest first episode as far as like what a pilot should do to kind of get people interested, and then my personal favorite. So I think the one that's like technically the strongest is Loki. I think that it kind of introduced the world while still sprinkling kind of these mysteries throughout it. It had humor. It really let you know what the show was going to be about. It had emotion right off the bat, whereas like a pretty emotional scene with Loki. Whereas WandaVision in Falcon and Winter Soldier took a while to kind of hit those emotional beats. So I think that as far as like what would probably be the best to get people interested in the next episode, I would say Loki. But I think I'm the weird outlier where I was one of the few people that absolutely loved the first 2 episodes of WandaVision. Okay. I think I mentioned to you before that I could honestly just watch an entire series that was just a black and white sitcom of Wanda and Vision. I loved it. So I was way into that. I loved the old timey throwback stuff. So I really like WandaVision, but Loki's that's how you should do a pilot, I think.
Well, and we have to say too that like Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany, they nailed the sort of comic sensibilities of like 50s, 60s sitcoms.
Yeah,
that was really good. I mean, those first 2 episodes were some of my least favorite of the show, just because I thought they were nailing what they were going for, but I was like, give me the weird. I want the weird. I'm here for the weird. I'm gonna say Loki myself. I really thought this pilot episode was really really strong.
Mhm.
Um, so I guess before we sort of go into some plot elements, um, are there any specific things that you want to talk about? Any specific performances? Anything like that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think that so far with the three MCU shows that have been going forward, it's clear that they're kind of banking on duos, kind of like dynamic duos in pairs. It's even though this show is simply called Loki, right off the bat, it's making it clear that Owen Wilson character's Mobius is going to be a major contributor.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously it's hard to say for sure, but I don't know if he's going to be like with Loki every step of the way. But this episode really kind of cemented that it's like, yeah, their dynamic together is going to be pretty integral to the story and into the show, and I loved it, and that's what I think is great. I hadn't seen Owen Wilson in something in a while.
Mhm.
Even the last few movies that he made, I think kind of flew under my radar, and I forgot how good it was to see him. Like he's so good, and he's transitioned from the early 2000s kind of stoner comedy Owen Wilson to like, I don't know, he just seems like a really sweet guy, and especially like this character seems like really genuine. One of the few people that seems to care about what's going on in the TVA, because they kind of showed like the judges and the soldiers and stuff. They're all very much like going by the rules, and we got to do this, and they show like moments of Mobius with Loki, but also moments of him in like in this 16th century church, and he stops to kind of interact with the child, and it's like this guy actually cares about things and he has emotions. So yeah, that's what really surprised me and what drew me in, was their relationship, Mobius, and this weird kind of psych evaluation that he had with Loki throughout this episode.
Well, and I also got the impression that he kind of cares for Loki too. Like he kind of
Mhm.
wants to help him, you know,
Yeah.
which we haven't seen a lot of in the MCU outside of maybe Thor.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I really liked that dynamic together, and it was nice to see Owen Wilson. He's still, you know, like you said, he's not doing the full on Owen Wilson circus, but he's still got
Mhm.
that Owen Wilson charm, and
Yeah.
I quite enjoyed that. Um, I also want to give a shout out to my fellow country woman. Tara Strong was the voice of Miss Minutes. I
Oh,
quite
cool.
liked that. As soon as Miss Minutes started talking, I was like, I know that voice. I know that voice. I couldn't place it. I had to look it up, but
Mhm.
that was a nice touch. And I really liked seeing, I believe I'm pronouncing this right, Gugu and Ra
Mhm.
as the sort of judge. I was introduced to her by that wonderful and one of the few uplifting episodes of Black Mirrors and San Junipero, which is so good if you haven't seen it.
Mhm.
And then I've seen her in a couple other things. She was in the Wrinkle in Time remake, which wasn't a great movie, but it's
Oh,
nice.
she was in that.
Yeah.
I mostly know her from this. It was kind of like a period piece called Belle. That was the first thing that I saw her, and she was really good in it. The movie was okay, and then she was in this movie called Beyond the Lights, and which is a pretty solid little film if you're interested. And yeah, so I've seen her in stuff, and she's been really good. So it was cool to kind of see her in this kind of bit part. I wonder if she's going to be in it more than just kind of like the initial episode.
I think she will because I think in one of the trailers she was in a scene that was not in this episode.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Maybe they cut it, who knows, but
Yeah.
um one thing you and I talked, you messaged me when that last trailer came out saying like how big and cinematic
Oh,
this
yeah.
show
Mhm.
looks, and it does, but I will say I don't feel like we got too much of that in this particular episode just because it was mostly just at the TVA that kind of looks like a 1970s university campus.
Yeah.
There is that one shot though where
Mhm.
Mobius is walking with Loki through that hallway overlooking like the big city with all the flying cars and all that.
Mhm.
That looked great. And if that's the sort of a look at what we're going to be seeing going forward, I'm into it.
Totally. It's yeah, the trailers, if for people who have seen them, it seems like the show's gonna go into some pretty epic territory. Like there's a lot of crazy alternate dimensions and worlds and such. The cool thing though is that you're absolutely right that this episode felt much kind of smaller and more contained, but even then it still felt very cinematic to me. There were times during Falcon and Winter Soldier where it just kind of, it felt kind of like a TV show. Like even if it was scenes of dialogue, it just like, well, that just kind of looks like digital cinematography. It just kind of looks like fast kind of run and gun shooting. Doesn't quite look like a movie. But this, even in when it was just scenes of like Mobius and Loki just talking, it felt like a just a little bit more cinematic than I think the previous shows. I also want to give a major shout out to, I'll look up who it is. It's probably not just one person, but I thought the production design was terrific in this
Absolutely.
episode. It's
Absolutely.
the whole TVA. I mean, it gave me a major Terry Gilliam's Brazil vibe. I mean,
I can see
obviously
that.
with the um, with the bureaucracy and the crazy red tape, where it's like there's Loki and this other guy show up in this room, and it's a long winding kind of ropes, and it's like take a ticket, and like there's two people here. But yeah, the production design was great because it's like you have that big epic open shot of with the TVA that looks like this futuristic kind of city, right? Kind of like a almost prequel Star Wars kind of city.
Right.
But then in the interiors, it's very claustrophobic and it has like this pseudo 60s, 70s aesthetic. And I loved it. I thought it was really inspired and for being in such small enclosed spaces, it's like I was never bored. I was like, there's still something interesting to look at, even in these cramped rooms.
Yeah, and I mean, there was. I'm not sure if it was the room like where he's actually getting judged by Ugugu and Betha, but the ceiling was those sort of big, sort of square red lamps in that
Oh yeah.
grid. Like that looked great.
Hmm.
And I also love that the TVA is, it doesn't control time, but whatever it does.
Yeah.
I love
Kind of
that
helps
all
to
of
maintain it.
right. I love that all of their technology is like really, really retro. Like when the guy's saying, confirm that these are all the words you've ever said, and it's all coming off like a dot
Hmm.
matrix printer, and the computers all look old. And I thought that was just a nice touch. I don't know why I think that, but I do.
I know, I love that. It's that sort of I actually just rewatched Aliens, James Cameron's Aliens yesterday, and I love that aesthetic of like 70s or 70s or 80s projections of the future. It's like Aliens was made in the 80s, but it's supposed to be in, I don't know, like 2150 or whatever, but they still like have video calls on video and it's like
Right.
super blurry, and like the computers are super bulky and it has like that black screen with the green text. So it feels very anachronistic. And I also noticed that too in this show with the production design. It's like I really dug that, where it's like it seems futuristic and or sci-fi at the very least, but also like retro in a lot of like little
Yeah.
details. Like you said, where they just kind of print it out. It feels hyper like sci-fi, almost to point of fantasy, but also like with one foot still in the past.
Right. So kind of what for me was sort of the centerpiece of this episode was the sort of tete-a-tete that Mobius and Loki have. The sort of, I said in my spoiler-free review, reminded me a lot, not so much in tone, but just in what was going on. Reminded me a lot of the interrogation room scene in The Dark Knight, and that you have these two.
Mhm.
Not that in this case these guys are necessarily enemies, although Loki seems to think they are, but just sitting down and having this conversation and really sort of beginning to understand one another's worldview.
Mhm.
I really, really liked that scene, and him asking Loki like, "Do you enjoy hurting people?" And Loki's trying to sort of deflect. Eventually, he answers the question later on. What did you think about that scene?
Yeah, that was my favorite part of the show as well. And it's something that goes back to how I felt during WandaVision, that I think I kind of lost a bit of this feeling during Falcon and Winter Soldier, was that because these are episodes now, and this is on the lower end, sorry, this is on the longer end of the episode length spectrum as opposed to like the 30 minutes of WandaVision,
Right.
but they're able to slow down. And if they just made like Loki into a movie, a 2-hour movie, it would just, this scene would be like a minute long and then it's boop, boop, action, blah, blah, blah. But because it's a show, they're able to slow down and have like I mentioned earlier, like a full on psych evaluation of
Mhm.
Loki. And that's interesting. That's more interesting to me than any like crazy special effects. They're shooting laser beams, fighting each other, but the interplay between Mobius and Loki, and Mobius not even being a dick, he wasn't being cruel about it, but really not letting Loki off the hook, where other people would be like, other people have tried to talk to Loki before in the franchise, and he'll say something snarky, and they just kind of say like, forget it, he's a lost cause.
Right.
But Mobius was like, no, you're not getting out of this. I asked you a question. Why do you like hurting people? Why do you like doing this? And yeah, most of the episode was just a look into Loki's psyche, what makes him tick in a way that has not been explored before in the franchise. And I thought that was great. I was well into it.
Yeah, I felt like there was more character development in that one scene than there's been in like a lot of his time in the MCU.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's something I noticed. It's this could be completely off base, but I almost feel like it's a bit of a middle finger from Kevin Feige, just a little bit of like, oh, you didn't like this movie? Well, it's so much more important than you think. Thor: The Dark World again, it gets a lot of play for what usually seems to be what people consider to be the worst or the lower tier of Marvel movies. Uh, it played a pretty big part in Avengers Endgame, and then it plays a pretty big part here. Like they show a lot of that movie. Did you notice that as well? That it's like, man, they're really prepping up this movie that people seem to not like as much compared to like other movies.
Yes and no. I mean, I know that you know, it did touch on, what is her name? Frigga?
Yeah,
Frigga's death. I'm sure some stuff went over my head because Thor 2 is the one MCU movie I have never been able to make it all the way through. I don't know
really?
what it is. I don't love the first Thor either, but I made it through it. Second, I've tried a couple times and I just cannot get into it. And then the third Thor is amazing. So
see, but that's my point. Like you're among the people who probably dislike the Thor: The Dark World the most as far as the MCU movies. And you would think, because it didn't make a ton at the box office, it was still successful. But it's like I said, routinely just kind of canned or shit on by a lot of fans. So the fact that you would think, I think another studio would be like, we're not even bringing this up again.
right.
But the fact that it took like, it was a major plot point in the Avengers Endgame, and here, you know, obviously they were focusing on the death of Loki's mother, so that's why they focused on it. But it really did feel like, hey, I know you guys didn't like this, but a lot of important shit actually did happen here, both for Thor's development and for Loki's development. So not a major thing. It was just something that I noticed.
No, that's funny.
Yeah.
And I will say that scene where Loki is essentially watching the videotape of his entire life, particularly the life that he lived after, like, because this Loki is the Loki that's introduced in Endgame. So he doesn't have any memories after 2012 because he hasn't lived that yet. So he's watching footage of his whole life up to that point, and then everything else after that point. So seeing the death of his mother, seeing the death of his father, seeing him fighting alongside Thor, and finally seeing his own demise at the hands of Thanos. And that was my favorite scene in the episode. I think, like, Loki and Tom Hiddleston's performance go through such a range of emotion in that scene, from laughter to crying to acceptance, with no dialogue whatsoever. I think that scene, for me, granted, I haven't seen the Thor: The Dark World all the way through, but that scene for me is the best work that Tom Hiddleston has done in the MCU thus far.
Oh, for sure. It's the deepest he's had to reach as an actor, Tom Hiddleston. And I kept thinking during that moment, like, how strange that, because he's essentially, I'll touch on this because this is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, but he's essentially watching the Blu-ray of Avengers Endgame. They just popped that on for him to see. But like they're showing.
You would think they would have the 4K though, right?
Okay, yeah, right, exactly. Like, come on, Ultra HD. Okay, I'm gonna.
But they'd have to play it in a VHS machine, right? A VCR.
Yeah, because it's got to be anachronistic and everything. That's okay. I'm going to touch on that real quick. That's a bit of a pet peeve of mine in movies. Other movies do it where, let's say, they need to show events like, we caught you on footage or whatever the fuck, and then they show, instead of showing, like, let's say, like security cams or something, they show the actual movie. You know what I mean? Like the same shot compositions, the same camera angles, the same everything. And so that they did it okay. Like they kind of made it like futuristic with the cutouts of the characters, but I couldn't help but think it's weird that they just have copies of the movies Avengers, you know, like it's not from a different angle. It's just the Avengers movie.
I
don't know.
had the exact same thought actually, and
Mhm.
I don't. It's not something I think about too often when they do that in movies, but particularly in this one because this wasn't them saying yes, we've got file footage of you, we've got security cam. This is literally like we're all knowing, all encompassing. We've seen your whole life, and it just happens to have, I guess, the TVA's cameraman just happened to be in the same spot as
Mhm.
Taika Waititi's cameraman. I don't know. That did seem a little odd to me.
Yeah, it
I don't
didn't.
know. I don't know
It
how
didn't.
else you would show it, but
It didn't ruin it for me. It was just a little thing that I noticed.
right,
One thing I'll say is like George Lucas actually does similar things in the prequels, and I guess they do it in kind of the Clone Wars shows as well. Where like let's say they'll have footage of someone, like they're having like a hologram conversation. Well, when they cut to the hologram, it's not just the same footage. Like they do stuff and you can see it from different angles and shit. But granted, that would have been really fucking costly for this show just to recreate all of those scenes. So I
right,
get why they did it. Anyway, the only reason why I brought that up was because I just thought it was strange how they showed that moment from Avengers Infinity War where Loki dies. And I remember seeing it in theaters and for the first time. And I was like, oh, that was a pretty gruesome death for this character, but I didn't really feel anything. Like it was just kind of like, okay, he's died. He dies. He's died before. He's probably going to come back, and he does come back. But now watching it, we're watching the same footage of Avengers Infinity War, but seeing it through the eyes of Loki as he sees himself be murdered. It was heavy, man.
mhm,
It added this layer of depth and kind of emotion to this scene that we've already seen, granted however many times we've rewatched that movie, but we know that scene pretty well. And it was like we were watching it fresh for the first time. I thought it was great.
yeah. I found that moment sort of genuinely disturbing, just because it goes
Mhm.
back to that question of like, would you want to know when you die or how you die? And it's like one of those things that you ponder, and usually I come to the conclusion of like, no, I don't think I want to know.
Mhm.
There is that kind of morbid curiosity there, and he got to see it, and it didn't look pleasant.
No, no, it did. No, it did not. Yeah, it's a weird kind of sci-fi trope. I can't think of proper example. Not trope, but it's like, yeah, that thing of witnessing your own demise. Like, would you want to know when your expiration date is? It's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I do want to jump back a little bit earlier in the episode because we saw this in the trailer. Loki sort of playing the role of DB Cooper on the plane with the money.
Mhm.
And man, I got in watching that one scene, and I don't know if he was ever actually up for the role or if just a lot of fans want him to take on the role. But in that scene with his really nice suit, he's being like super charming. I was like, I could see this guy as a Bond. I could totally see this guy as a Bond.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I I agree. I don't know if he was ever actually considered or if it was just like kind of fan speculation, but he can pull off the suave kind of dapper look. Um this is that DB Cooper thing kind of disappointed me, and it shouldn't, because I went in with my own expectations. Again, I've learned from the other Marvel shows not to do that. But when they show it in the trailers, I thought that moment, that scene would play a more important part in it,
Yeah,
because I was like, oh, he's DB Cooper. Maybe they're going back in time to the 1960s because what DB Cooper actually did help save the galaxy or whatever. No, it was just a gag that didn't really make sense. Like, I lost a bet to Thor, so I went to Earth. And I was like, wait, it seemed like going to Earth was a pretty new and big thing in the first Thor movie. Like it didn't seem like they just popped down there for a few, you know what I mean?
mhm,
Like it felt like they kind of retconned the first Thor movie and kind of took the importance of them going to Midgard for the first time. Whereas now it's like, oh, we just fucking like popped in every now and then just to fuck around with humans. Like, okay,
right.
I don't know.
Well, and one scene, that I was messaging you about, it occurred to me about halfway through this episode. We don't really know what the premise of this show is. We know it's
Mhm.
Loki centric, but we don't know what the goal is. We don't know what the conflict is. We don't know anything like that. And a couple minutes before the end of the episode, Owen Wilson's Mobius basically drops what the premise, presumably the premise of the entire series is. And again,
Mhm.
I don't know if we know if they're planning a season 2, but as far as we know, this is just going to be 6 episodes,
Mhm.
or at least this season. If they do another season, this season looks to be 6 episodes.
Yeah.
So I imagine this is the plot going forward, but basically it's kind of a Silence of the Lambs type thing where Mobius's Clarice Starling is going to is going to um, Tom Hiddleston's Hannibal
Loki.
Lecter,
Yeah, I see.
uh,
Yeah.
because he's a specialist, because they're trying to track Loki, a different Loki who is jumping through time, I think killing people, doing some nefarious stuff. And as soon as they dropped that, I was like, oh, I'm in. I'm in.
Good.
I love this premise. How did that land for you?
It was good. I was interested as well. Is it's dumb because when I first heard it, I was incredulous, but then I think I kind of thought back of like what I've heard about what the show is going to entail, and it made more sense because I messaged you being like, I don't think that's Loki, and at the end, because they show like after Owen Wilson drops that bomb, you see like kind of someone in a cloak kind of doing nefarious things. Um, but I feel dumb because of like Kevin Feige and other people have mentioned before that we're going to see multiple versions of Loki. So it's like, yeah, they absolutely are going to go after Loki, but it may not look like the Loki we know. It may not act like the Loki we know. It seems like it's not even going to be played by Tom Hiddleston. Like there's this mysterious woman that's shown up a little bit in the trailers that she doesn't have a character name yet on IMDb, I don't believe, and a lot of people think she's just like Loki from another dimension, like a female version of Loki. So, and also, the opening title is Loki, but it's like it's always flicking, like it's
Hmm.
different fonts and different styles. So I think we're gonna get a lot of Lokis. I don't think it's simply just gonna be Loki from 2012 going after one. I think it's gonna be him interacting with a whole bunch of other Tom Hiddlestons and other versions, which is really exciting. That's that kind of weird out there sci-fi alternate dimension nonsense multiverse that
Right.
gets me excited. A lot of multiverse talk in this, which gets me excited both for the rest of this series, but also for Doctor Strange too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So he's going after a multiple loci.
yeah.
Uh,
Okay, that's
that's
yeah, it's the proper
right.
pluralization, I
I
believe.
believe so.
Mhm.
No, that's interesting. I mean, whether it's like this woman you're speaking of, I didn't know about that, but whether that's just like the way Loki is in a different dimension or a different universe, or if that's Loki just putting on a disguise because he can do that too.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I would like to see Tom Hiddleston go up against another Tom Hiddleston at some point.
Oh yeah.
And I really hope he doesn't come out in the media and say, "Oh, I get to work with an actor that I've always wanted to work with." I do
No.
hope they've learned their lesson on that
Oh
one, but
man. Yeah, no, I think Marvel sent out a memo to all its stars after Paul Bettany said that. It's
I
like
would
don't
imagine
don't
so.
fucking do this again.
There's one more thing I want to bring up, and I forgot to get the name. So give me 1 second here. One thing that really stood out to me about this episode that I really, really liked was the score. I thought the score was fantastic,
Hmm.
and it is by Natalie Holt, um, which alone is kind of cool because you don't see a lot of female composers in Hollywood. Off the top of my head, I can name one other one, Hildur
Hmm.
Guðnadóttir, who of course won the Oscar for Joker.
Hmm.
But I loved the score in this. I thought it was like weird. It had an almost like creepy Twilight Zone kind of thing
Hmm.
happening a little bit, but then it got
Hmm.
like really sort of bonkers and bombastic. Was that something that stood out to you,
It
or
did. It did. Yeah, about like pretty early on, I turned to my wife and said like this sounds like Doctor Who's theme, especially the original one,
I
where
could
because
hear that,
it sounds sort of like a theremin, where it's like woo,
right?
woo, and I love that. It's because it's like it's a cool little like shorthand, audio shorthand of like this is sci-fi and weird and out there.
Right.
Yeah, so I noticed it too. Whereas Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think had like a good score, but I don't really remember much from it.
Yeah.
But this, yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes too, because it did seem to like really match the scenes and the wilder that the series is gonna get. I want to see how much wilder this score is going to get as well.
Okay. Before we move on to In the Heights, are there any other specific things you want to talk about for Loki?
Yes.
Okay.
Not a major thing, but just something that I noticed. This didn't really upset me, but it seemed very contrived, and I didn't quite like it. So it had to do with the Infinity Stones. Like, it's revealed pretty like early on, or at least halfway through maybe, that in the TVA, Infinity, obviously, because there's so many dimensions and everything, they just have a bunch of Infinity Stones left over. They make a joke that people use them as paperweights. Um, and the reason why that I think is kind of dumb is because I understand what they're doing. So this happens a lot in cartoon shows that have multiple series, in comic books especially, where they'll have several issues leading up to one major crossover event. In the last few phases, Marvel was all leading up to the Infinity War and in Endgame. So Infinity Stones were the biggest, most important thing, yada yada yada. Well, that crossover happened and it's done with. So now we have to come up with something even bigger and better. And a quick way to indicate that, oh, the threat that you thought was such a big deal before, it's nothing. We're just going to make those most important MacGuffins in the world just paperweights. And it's like I said, I'm not like pushing my glasses up. Well, that's not fair. It's just more like, it seems obvious to me. It's like, okay, we need to come up with a bigger, badder threat than the Infinity Stones. So let's just throw the Infinity Stones under the bus and make them a joke now. And it's like, well, it kind of makes the preceding events feel a little less important. It's, I don't know, just a thought. Probably won't think about it again, but it was just something I noticed.
I actually thought it was kind of a fun and simple way to show like how much bigger the implications of this series could be potentially going forward.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was kind of funny. And that's another thing I wanted to point out. Casey, very funny. Casey made me laugh a lot. I like that guy.
Oh yeah, just like the lowly government worker. Yeah,
Yeah.
I liked him too. I hope that he's in it more as well. Eugene Cordero
Yeah.
is the actor's name.
And the one thing that didn't make sense to me is like how he's like, what's a fish? It's just like, but isn't your job to like oversee all these? Like, certainly you would have seen Earth or Midgard or whatever it's called. Like, wouldn't you know
Oh,
what a fish is?
yeah. So I have two thoughts on that. One, I guess he can wave it away like maybe he's just been stuck behind a desk forever, but whatever. But here's the thing. Also, I'm just gonna let it go because time travel is time travel. But for an organization that knows what the proper timeline is, and it's seemingly they're not. It seems as though they're not letting it occur. How do I say it? Time is not linear for them, right? It does not seem linear. They can jump back and forth at different periods of time. So it's not like this was set in 2021. It's like set in infinite or whatever.
Right.
So how is it possible that the TVA gets like ambushed? Like, how do they, at the end when it's a bunch of the soldiers going in to get Loki, how do they not know that I mean, I can understand that that's like maybe they let it happen because it's supposed to happen, but you would think since they're the fucking controllers and they're going after someone that shouldn't be in the timeline, shouldn't they know that it's a trap? You know what I mean? They should have precognition. They should know like what is going to happen.
Right. That's an interesting point. I don't know. Hopefully it gets explained going forward. But
Yeah. I don't know. Just last thought.
But so you're into the show. You're gonna watch the next episode, I guess.
For sure, yeah, for sure. In the way that Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I don't mean to shit on the show, but in a way that the first episode didn't really excite me for the next following episodes, Loki has me very excited. I'm very eager for next Wednesday just to see what is going to happen next.
Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so of course, everybody watching, what did you think about Loki? Jump down to the comments below. Let's have a little discussion. It'll be fun. I'll try and make it fun anyway. So we're going to move on. We are going to do a full spoilers review of In the Heights. Again, if you want a spoiler-free review because perhaps you haven't seen it yet, there is one on my channel. I'll put the link to the guy up there. And of course, if you want to keep watching the rest of this podcast, but you don't want to hear it, I will also put on the screen, Court in editing. Remember to do this. I'll give you the time code. Jump to that. point and you will miss the entire spoiler discussion. Everything will be fine. So, Chris, I'll ask you first. You had not seen this show on stage or anything. Did you know much about it?
Oh, I've seen a community theater production of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I didn't see like a proper kind of touring Broadway show. So, but I saw it in a solid theater, and it had production value. So I am familiar with this show. My wife is in musical theater, so I try to keep up with it as well. So I've been a fan of this. I've heard about it, but even before Hamilton became quite big. So I actually went into this with a fair amount of expectation and anticipation because yeah, but have you heard about this before or seen it or
I'd
anything?
I'd heard the title. I knew it was Lin-Manuel Miranda. I
Hmm.
didn't really know anything about it.
Hmm.
Um, I will also say I'm not a huge musical guy, and obviously we'll get to that in the discussion later. But I went into this pretty blind. You went in knowing the story, knowing some of the numbers,
Hmm.
and you had, as you said, you had some expectations. So before we sort of get to the story and what have you, did it live up to your expectations? Did it exceed your expectations? Did it let you down?
No, I think it was great. I thought this was really really good. And it's one of the better kind of musical adaptations to movies. Because it really did, like, every adaptation you need to kind of change things around. You need to kind of cut some stuff because what works in one medium doesn't work in the other medium. And so there are changes that I noticed. But I think they were for the better because it kind of helps streamline the story. And yeah, this is it's, for the most part, it's very very faithful to the show, to the stage production, and it really captured that energy and the fun and the emotion that the stage show had. So I'm a big fan of this movie. I think it lives up to the hype because it has like a 97% rating on Rotten Tomatoes right now. Like, everybody seems to be really enjoying it, and I think it's well deserved.
Yeah, I again I went into this a little dubious because I'm not a huge musical guy and
Hmm.
whatever. I thought this movie was great.
Yeah.
Um, I have a couple problems with it, and we'll get to
Hmm.
those. But
Hmm.
for the most part, I really enjoyed the numbers. I thought the choreography was wonderful.
Hmm.
I thought there were, and I don't know if they pulled this in the stage show, but I mentioned in the non spoiler, it had these little sort of visual moments of like whimsy, and by
Hmm.
that I mean right in the opening number when Uznavi, which the reveal of where he got that name
That's funny. Yeah.
was wonderful.
Hmm. Yeah.
But there's that opening moment where, like, the guy's spraying the hose to the beat and blah blah blah, but then his foot goes down on the manhole cover and he like racks it like a DJ scratching,
Mm.
little things like that. Or when when Vanessa's walking and she's thinking about being a fashion designer and all those like swaths of fabric are coming off the
Mhm.
rooftops, and little touches like that I thought were just wonderful. um do you should we talk about the cast first?
Sure, yeah. Let's just kind of go through because it's a big old cast.
Yeah.
Somebody get that. But yeah, so in the leading role as Usnavi, which was a role that was originated by Lin-Manuel Miranda in the original Broadway production. This was kind of like his claim to fame. He was pretty young when he first wrote it, and it's kind of semi-autobiographical. It's set in the a neighborhood called Washington Heights, which is in Manhattan. They say Washington. Washington. I love the way they pronounce it. And it's like not a one-to-one exact retelling of his childhood, but it drew a lot of inspiration. So Anthony Ramos, who's also in Hamilton, plays Usnavi. And for a lead, the dude is incredible. I
Right.
thought this guy fucking crushed it. Like,
Mhm.
he's so charming and likable, but able to go to these extreme depths. And I'm so glad that they got, a trained stage actor and trained singer and dancer, because a lot of times in movie adaptations they get Russell Crowe. You know what I mean? They go for the big names
Yeah.
as opposed to someone who would actually be better in the role. And the same with the rest of the cast. I'm just going to go through the kind of the four main younger leads, and then you can say like what you thought about them. So Anthony Ramos, I thought was fantastic. Melissa Barrera, who plays Vanessa. That's the love interest for Usnavi. She's the one that's also like the aspiring fashion designer.
Mhm.
We have Leslie Grace as Nina. She's the young girl that was one of the few people that left the barrio, essentially to go to school all the way across the country in Stanford. So she's kind of she's this young woman that has this a massive amount of weight and expectation on her shoulders, not just from her father, who is helping to finance. He's breaking his back to help finance her go to a college because he never went himself. But she has the weight and expectation of the entire community on her
Mhm.
back. They're looking at her. It's like, wow, she got out. She's doing something with
She's
her
the
life.
inspiration. Yeah.
Yeah, and you get to see how much that pressure gets to her. I thought she did a really good job. And then one of my favorite characters, Benny, played by Corey Hawkins. He's the dispatch. He works at like the dispatch for Nina's father, and he's just a incredibly likable friend. And all four of them are terrific. I wish that the four of them kind of interacted together more. Um, but I thought, as far as those main leads, they're all very very likable. Um, I think that uh, the Leslie Grace and Anthony Ramos were kind of the standouts for me.
Okay.
Not that Melissa Barrera was bad, but I thought that her character didn't have as much to do as some of the others. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the big four?
I would agree with that. I pretty much only know Corey Hawkins as Dre, and I really liked him as Dre.
Mhm.
Um, dude can sing, dude
Yeah.
can dance. Like that was really impressive to me. I thought the two female leads were both wonderful. Again, great
Mhm.
singers, great dancers.
Mhm.
They both had a couple of really great acting moments. In fact,
Mhm.
um, Vanessa, there's that one song where they're singing about champagne, and it was a lovely little piece. But when she goes and kisses him, and this was, I spent the whole first half of the movie going like, this movie's not going to get me emotionally. Like I'm digging it, it's not going to get me there.
Mhm.
I got choked up 2 or 3 times towards the end, but
Mhm.
that moment where she goes and kisses him and says, "I'm not mad, I'm just like too late." The way
Mhm.
she played that scene, not just the singing, but just her facial acting was really wonderful. And Leslie Grace as Nina, she's got some really wonderful moments. And this is her first like on-screen thing. Like I think
Yeah.
she's done music videos, but she's never been in a movie before.
Mhm.
And I think it's going to be a star turn for both of them.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely. And Anthony Ramos as well. I mean, he's done some other things.
Mhm.
He's not a household name. I think he's going to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, especially after this. Yeah, and those are just the main leads like we're talking about, but there's so many other ones. The Abuela, that's which for me was kind of like everything surrounding her. I mean, this is spoilers, so everything kind of surrounding her death was the most emotional part for me because
Mhm.
I really loved that character in the sense that she kind of adopted the neighborhood. And
Yeah.
it's we've seen things like this before, but it always kind of chokes me up whenever you see just how far reaching someone is to other people. When you see everybody kind of mourning her and it's the entire neighborhood with the
Dude, that moment when they all came up with the candles singing that thing that she used to say, like I was
yeah.
just, it was
Yeah,
going.
because there's something, she's such a sweet calming presence, and you really felt, especially with like everybody just kind of coming over to her house uninvited, but they're always welcomed.
Mhm.
It's just this feeling of family and friendship and camaraderie, and it really got to me. And again, it was just one of those things where we see a little bit of kind of like her history, like she came, I believe, from Cuba, and just kind of how much she had to work, and she sings about how difficult her life was. And seemingly on the surface, it could seem like, oh, well, she's just kind of been stuck in one place her entire life. She didn't really do much. You could say that in kind of a pessimistic way, but then you see just how many lives she touched and how many people she meant the world to.
Mhm.
Yeah, so she was great. She got a great number. It was one of those things I almost kind of forgot from the show. I was like, oh yeah, Abuela gets a pretty killer number, like in going through the subway station with kind of her history flashing. um
And it should be
mm,
said that's Olga Meredi. She played
mm.
that role on Broadway.
Oh, did she? Was she the
Yeah,
original? That's awesome.
I
Okay.
don't know if she was I don't know if she originated the role because the show
Mm.
didn't start on Broadway. It started off Broadway.
That's true. Yeah.
I don't know if she was there, but when it was
Mm.
on Broadway, at least for a time, she played the role.
That makes sense, and I'm really glad that they did that. Again, I think we see kind of often movie musicals, especially if they're adaptations, they just go for big names. Even if they get talented actors that can sing or can dance, they usually can't sing or dance as well as someone that is on Broadway. So I'm glad that they didn't just get more recognizable name for a
Now
lot of the characters.
I would have also accepted Rita Moreno. That would have
Oh,
been kind of
absolutely.
cool.
I
But
think
they
so.
actually they name check her at one point when Uznavi's singing to the kids. And I want to talk about that framing device in a second, so don't let me forget. But when he's talking to the kids and he's talking about like the various Hispanic singer dancers over the years, and so they sort of mentioned like the big four or whatever, but then he's like, also Rita. I was like, I see what you did there. So I guess it makes sense that she wasn't in the movie, but
Yeah, absolutely. It would be kind of very meta.
mhm.
No, but I don't know where I was going with that. I don't know. I lost it. Oh, I was just gonna say that it makes sense because this is very much inspired by West Side Story.
Mhm.
It's very similar. In fact, it's funny because I was reading just a little bit of trivia that this was filming at the same time that Steven Spielberg's upcoming West Side Story was filming.
Okay.
In fact, in the same area, so close that they said that in some shots there are catering vans for West Side Story that appear in frame of in the Heights. Like
That's
they were
awesome.
literally like right across the street, and they would go over and like see each other because West Side Story inspired exactly Lin-Manuel Miranda when he was younger, but he said that he wanted to tell a similar story but without like negative stereotypes. Like he
Right.
didn't want there to be gangs and guns and violence, which he accomplished.
Yeah, I think this is a very uplifting story.
For sure. Yeah. No, so not to go over every single cast member, but just to kind of quickly round it out. Jimmy Smits as Nina's father is great. He's always great. This kid, the kid who played Sonny, the young cousin, killed it. Gregory Diaz the fourth is his name, and he has this rap number during the pool scene when they're
Mhm.
singing about the lottery. And I'm like, where did they find this kid? He's awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a ton of other ones, but everyone's great, and there is no weak link in the cast, I think.
No, excuse me. No, there really wasn't.
Mm.
And the pool scene was one of my favorite numbers.
Oh yeah.
One thing I really liked about Jimmy Smits, who I always like, and again, I've liked him for a long time. Didn't know he could sing and dance. He doesn't do too much of that in this movie, but one thing I really liked, his performance, kind of along with Abuelo Claudia.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the performances in this movie, because it's a musical, they're big. They're playing to the back of the room. His performance is very kind of contained. It's restrained. It's really good, but it's never loud. It's always very sort of quiet. And that was a nice sort of juxtaposition for me.
For sure, yeah. It was great to kind of have like the kind of older characters. Not that he's that old or anything, but just kind of be more subdued and kind of be this anchor of the society and the story, or sorry, of the neighborhood and of the story, so that these kind of younger kids with the sueñitos, the little dreams, they're the ones that are bursting with energy and ambition and
Right.
longing. Yeah, it's terrific.
So a couple things that I want to talk about just quickly. One of my favorite, it's not one of my favorite songs in the show. I kind of like the more upbeat ones, but that scene between Benny and Nina on the fire escape was just beautiful. And I remember, you know, they're on the fire escape and then he starts planking on the fire escape. And I'm like, dude, that's just dangerous. And then he starts walking up the wall and the camera, and then I thought that was visually absolutely stunning. I was getting like Inception vibes out of it.
Yeah.
It's a very different kind of movie. Absolutely loved that. But one thing I really want to talk about is this movie uses a framing device. We're introduced at the very beginning to Uznavi. His whole thing in this film is he came to America when he was 8 years old with his father. His father passed away, but he had this American dream for his son. And then he'd owned a bar or a hotel. The father, I mean, had owned a bar or hotel back in the DR. And I guess it got hit by a hurricane and it's all destroyed. And Uznavi's dream is to go back to the DR because that's where he had the happiest days of his life, rebuild it, make his living there. And we know right off the bat that he did that because throughout the film, it's essentially he's telling his story of his time in New York to these kids on the beach by this bar or this hotel. So we keep cutting back to him from time to time doing that. So the whole movie, we're like, okay, so he makes it back. That's great. But then, throughout the second half of the film, he's falling in love with Vanessa. She wants to move uptown and become a fashionista, if you will. He wants to go back to the DR, and we realize it's just not going to work between the two of them. And it was making me sad because, like, I really like these two together.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, it's the morning of his flight. He's going to fly home, and she invites him. He, of course, throughout the movie, runs this bodega in the neighborhood, and he's going to have to give that up. And I think there's part of him that doesn't want to give it up because it's been his for so long. But he's getting ready to leave, and she's like, "Come into the bodega. I want to show you something." And he goes in, and she's basically taken it over, and she's turned it into her fashion warehouse office storefront where she's going to sell her stuff. And the camera sort of pans over, and one of their buddies who does all the local graffiti, he's painted this giant mural on the wall of Uznavi's father's beach, clubhouse, hotel, whatever. And it was just beautiful. And I'm sitting there watching this scene, and I'm thinking, like, well, now I don't want him to go back. I know he's going to, but I don't want him to, because, like, everything is here. And the camera just kind of shifts and pulls out a little bit, and then we see all those kids sitting there, and then we see it's not him actually on a beach, but it's him in front of this mural. He's decided to stay in New York. One of the girls is his daughter, which they set up earlier. One of the girls is his daughter. We see that he's married Vanessa. And again, fucking waterworks. Like, that ending hit me so hard. It was so beautiful. I'm curious, how did they do that on stage? Do you remember?
They didn't have that framing device on stage, so they didn't do that. They kept in the stage show, they had him, always talk about going back to the Dominican Republic, and so they still have a similar ending where he's about to leave, and they show him that they painted the mural, and that kind of is a way of saying, like, your home is here, like a way of kind of bringing the home that he has in the Dominican Republic over to the home that really he grew up and was raised in the Heights. And so it achieved the same thing without having that kind of narrative device. I'm glad. I like the addition of the narrative device. I think that was it's one of those things where I said, like, it's a mark of a good adaptation where they added something new that made it much more cinematic, because like you were saying, it makes you question, like, well, I've seen him on this beach, so he must make it, right? And they were able to show that, like, it was like a yes and no, but in a good way. It was a positive way where it's like, yeah, no, he has his dream. He has this bar. He's talking to the kids, and he's on this beach. But at the same time, it is his home. Like, he didn't have to fly thousands of miles away to reach it, and he's with the people that he loves and cares about. So yeah, I thought that was great.
And I maybe I'm just crazy, but, like, in that scene, the way it played out when they're sort of dropping breadcrumbs as they go along, that, oh no, he's in New York and he's decided to make his life here. So you start seeing these little tokens and totems of, like, the bottle of champagne when they had the champagne song, or, like, other things that he collected throughout the film. And it was, like, very the ending of Usual Suspects to me, except, like, uplifting.
Yeah,
I don't know if it hit you that way, but
I didn't peg that. But now that you mention it, I can see exactly what you're talking about, where it's like everything's just kind of clicking into place.
Yeah,
I see it. Yeah.
Probably say it like Usual Suspects a little bit more, but whatever. I love that movie.
No,
so yeah, I mean, huge recommendation for me. It sounds like it's a big one from you. Oh, I guess we should talk about a couple negatives. Sorry, before we move on.
Yeah, because this isn't a perfect movie for me, so I do have some things that I think kind of kept it down.
Okay, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So before I get into much of the negatives, I do just want to say that I think that it's so full of energy. The songs are terrific. I love Lin-Manuel Miranda's work because he's such like a lyrical and musical. He's so brilliant at it, where he's able to mix all these different genres of hip hop and rap, but also a lot of Latin themes and in traditional Broadway musicals, into something that feels both new but also familiar. The story itself is also nothing too kind of radically new. It's not like, oh my God, that's what the plot is. But, we've seen before that, people with dreams and they want to kind of get out of, like, the neighborhood that they came from. But it's done with such style, and it's done through a perspective that's not commonly seen in cinema. Like, the fact that it truly is like this primarily Latino community, either from Dominican Republic or Cuba or Puerto Rico. I love that. The negatives that I would say though,
Actually, can I
oh yeah,
jump
go
in for
for
one
it, go
second?
for it.
I
Yeah,
just want to mention, so I'm a huge Weird Al fan. Love Weird Al. Um, you know who that is, right?
of course.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
You're,
not that.
you're a lot
I'm
younger. I
not.
don't know.
I'm almost 30. I'm not that young.
All right. So Lin-Manuel Miranda's like been a Weird Al fan for forever. And
Yeah,
after Hamilton came out, Weird Al, because every album he does like some kind of polka, and he did the Hamilton polka, which I've listened to it. It's crazy because it's like
yeah,
so fast. But if you go on YouTube, you can see Lin-Manuel Miranda, who is a fan and friends with Weird Al. You can see him listening to it for the first time, and
yeah.
he's like just losing his mind. It's fantastic. Anyway,
Mm.
sorry, your negatives.
No, no. Well, the polka sucks. No, I saw that video too, and it's very heartwarming. I love that Lin, even though he's famous now, he still seems to get like starstruck. Like nobody's told him that he's famous at
Right.
this point. Also, Lin makes a cameo with one of the more lovable characters from the show, as the piragua guy. Piragua is essentially like shaved ice. It's kind of like a snow cone, and it's such a catchy tune, like piragua. So I thought it was fun that he kind of grew a bit of a belly, and so anyway, just whatever negatives.
Yeah, because he would have been a little bit too old to play the
Yes,
main
to
role
to
here.
play like I'm 20. Like, are
Yeah.
you? Are you? So I felt like more in the first half than the second half. I felt that John M. Chu's direction really popped and was really on point where with the musical numbers. I thought like he's got such an eye for it, and he's understanding the beats of the story. Like it felt like, and the beats of the song too. But there were certain dialogue scenes in between the musical numbers that felt a little bit more pedestrian. None of it was bad. All of it was competent, but it just felt like there was a scene in particular of Nina and her father at a diner, and it just kind of felt like traditional shot, reverse shot. Okay, we got a wide, and it kind of like there's no rhythm to the scene other than like the way the editing of it, and it's all kind of shot flatly. And again, it's not bad, it's efficient. Nothing is bad about it, but it just felt a little uninspired.
Okay.
um I thought that got better for even the non-dance number scenes as the movie got on, because there was other dramatic scenes when they weren't singing that I was like, oh, that really works. There was actually a scene with a cameo from Mark Anthony,
Was
that
there?
he played, Sonny the kid,
Mhm.
the kid who's illegal immigrant. He's the deadbeat father. You remember how Usnavi went to go visit his father, and he's all tatted up and he's just drinking
He's
beer?
having a bit. Oh, that was wow.
That's Mark Anthony. Yeah, dude is skinny as fuck now, but
Yeah.
he was good. Anyway, so yeah, so it got better as it went on, but I noticed a little bit of like, that seems a bit studio. It seems a bit safe as opposed to like keeping the same level of inventiveness that he has in the musical numbers, because the musical numbers are great.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, the one where they're dancing on the rooftop. It's not a flawless effect, but it's so charming, and it is still so visually stunning that it's like it's hard not to get swept up in it.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. And like you mentioned, them dancing at the pool, it's terrific. And there's there's so many bodies on screen just doing this pretty complex choreography,
Mhm.
and it's just stunning to behold.
And everyone's like totally in unison, and
Yeah.
yeah.
The one thing I'll say about some of the bigger choreographed scenes is, I don't know if this is John M. Chu's doing or if it was kind of pressure from the studio. I felt a little bit, not too much, but it was similar to how some action scenes in movies are cut in modern movies, where it's a lot of quick cuts when it didn't need to be. Because
Right.
like there's certain times when like they're cutting, it's all but like wides, like they'll be showing a wide shot of all these people dancing, and then it'll just cut to different angles pretty rapidly. And I didn't feel like that was needed, because it's like, man, there's already so much shit going on the screen. I promise you the audience won't get bored if you just linger on a shot for longer than a few
Right.
seconds. Like there's
Sure.
too much. So again, nothing terrible. But that I noticed. And then my last real complaint, before I hand it over to you, is that although I think most of the changes were for the better, they did kind of cut some songs from the show that I think gave better send-offs to certain characters. Like
Mm.
Benny and Nina felt like such big, important characters through most of the movie, and they have one hell of a final number. But besides that number, it feels like they got a little bit forgotten about narratively. Like it was like they were so big, and then they were just kind of like, oh yeah, now they're together and everything's fine. That's like, okay. It felt like a little bit like they kind of like were juggling too much and didn't give enough emphasis on them. In
Okay.
addition, it felt like a really great conclusion to Usnavi and Vanessa's story, but maybe not a 100% conclusion, great conclusion for everyone's story.
Mm.
But yeah, that's about it. There, none of those ruined it for me. None of those were glaring. It was just kind of some nitpicks that I had. Because overall, I think it's pretty great.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I can't disagree with any of that.
Mm.
Although you saying cutting some of the songs does fly in the face of what I'm about to say, but this movie's 2 hours, 2.5 hours long, and I felt it. Like it,
Mm.
I was really enjoying it, but there were moments, and I found particularly, I was feeling the length particularly more in the second half
Mm-hmm.
when it started going into the conflict. I found that kind of killed the momentum for me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I had to take a good couple of breaks in this movie. Much as I was enjoying it, it did feel really long. One other thing that drove me a little bit crazy was some of the lip syncing
Mm-hmm.
really didn't look right to me. And what I mean is that, it's one thing if it's a mellow song, but like if what we're hearing on the soundtrack is people like really belting it out, and what they're doing on screen is
Mm-hmm.
like it just there's a disconnect there. It's like, no, what I'm hearing, that should be really coming out of you. That's a great image.
Just
Um,
just really coming out, just
yeah,
hard and fast.
yeah. Jesus Christ. Yeah, it just looked off, like that was,
I noticed that a couple times. Yeah.
yeah, and it's by no means a lot of the time, but there
Mm.
were a few moments where it was like really, really like strikingly obvious and very distracting.
Mhm. No, I don't disagree. I will say this about the length. I don't know if you had more
No,
negatives you wanted. Okay, I'll say this about the length. Because it is long. Like I said, it's almost 2.5 hours long. I guess it's because I do watch like a ton of musicals, and not just, well, before the pandemic. I was gonna say actual stage shows as well. Like my wife's in them a lot, but also like we know the community, so we go out to see a bunch of other people's shows. And musicals are fucking long, man.
yeah,
Like seriously, like a night out at a musical, especially if it's like a Broadway level production. It's the entire thing, including an intermission, is going to be 3 hours, 3 hours plus.
hmm,
That's just kind of the nature of it. And without that intermission, I could see how you can kind of feel it. Um, but I think maybe because I'm more accustomed to it, I didn't really feel the length. It was just kind of like, yeah, this is typically it's pretty typical pacing as far as a musical goes, of kind of the highs and lows. So it didn't really bother me that much. So maybe for other like fellow watchers who watch a lot of musicals, especially like classics from like the 50s and 60s, where like they like Sound of Music's nearly like what, 3 hours long. Like
something like that. Yeah,
old musicals are effing long. um maybe won't the length won't bother you, but I think that like kind of more casual musical watchers like yourself, I could see how the length kind of wears on you, and you're like, all right, let's trim this up in the middle a bit.
right.
Mhm.
All right, so I guess we will move on again. Everyone watching, if you want to jump into the comments, let us know what you thought of In the Heights, or let us know. Well, we'll get to that because we're getting into our final topic here today, which is we're going to talk about our favorite and least favorite musicals. Um, they could be movies, they could be stage. I think we're both going to say movies. I've got like a runner up that's a stage just because I don't think a lot of people know about it, and it was cool.
Mm.
So, should we go least favorite or favorite first?
What's your least favorite? That's fun.
Okay, you want to go first?
Sure, man.
Yep.
I was this close, and it's not for any shock value. Not shock value, but I was this close to saying Cats,
Okay,
because Cats is that bad. As
it's
bad as
bad.
people have heard about it, it is that bad. I watched it, like I said, with my wife who loves musicals, and we were kind of drinking along with it and having a bit of fun at first. Like, this is kind of shitty, right? But by the end of it, I was clawing my eyes out No pun intended. I don't know if that's a cat pun, but I was just like, this is so bored. But
Particularly when Dame Judi Dench does a whole song looking directly at the camera.
And it just won't stop. So I was tempted to do that, but since it was so recent and there was still more effort put into this other movie that I'm going to mention, which is Grease 2.
Okay.
The sequel to Grease, which is just awful, that doesn't have the returning cast. It was made 10 years later than the first movie. Like, so by the time, because Grease was a massive hit. If people don't, if you're younger, you might know what Grease is, but Grease was a pretty big deal when it came out. John Travolta and was it Olivia Newton-John?
Olivia Newton-John, yeah.
Yeah. Which is, it's cheesy and it's campy, and I haven't seen it in a while, but the first one might be a little bit problematic as far as like 2021 social terms.
Wouldn't surprise me.
I don't remember, but I'm like, okay, it gets kind of like assaulting. Anyway, but the sequel, I don't know if you've seen it, is just the most uninspired rehash. It's like, think of Grease 1, but then just like cut the budget in half, get not good actors, musical numbers that just like will go in one ear and out the other, and you're like, what was music playing? I didn't even notice, because it's just so uninteresting. And if you thought the first one had like 30 or 40-year-olds that were trying to be teenagers, oh my god, the sequel doubles down on that. Of just like, no, there's no way this kid is this grown-ass man with a full fucking, oh my god, is supposed to be 15. Like, it's just bad.
Isn't
like,
Michelle Pfeiffer in that one?
She is. That was one of her earlier roles.
Okay.
I mean, she was, stunning. Michelle Pfeiffer is a lovely lady. Like, I say that like I've met her. She's a great lady. Owes me $20, but
right.
Yeah. So the reason why I chose that is that Cats, if it at least feels like someone tried. That's what I'll say. Cats was a massive swing, so it was a massive miss, but at least it feels like someone gave a shit about it. Right. Grease 2, nobody gave a shit.
Okay.
The end.
Okay, so for my least favorite musical of all time, I'm willing to bet you haven't heard of this. I'm willing to bet any American hasn't heard of this. This is a movie that should never have been made. It is a Canadian film, and it makes me ashamed to be Canadian. I'm not ashamed to be Canadian, but this movie is like an embarrassment. It is called, and I shit you not, Score, a hockey musical. And so it's about, and it doesn't really have anybody of note in it that I can recall, except for a Canadian musician named Hawksley Workman, who I'm a fan of, but he's got kind of a small role. But it's about this kid who is, I think it takes place in like the prairies in Alberta or Saskatchewan or something. Mm-hmm. But it's about this kid who he's homeschooled, but he's a wicked hockey player, and he gets on like a local team because he's amazing. But his whole thing is he's a pacifist, and he will not drop the gloves. He will not fight. And the whole movie, they're trying to convince him to fight. And of course, there's a love story and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But they're trying to get him to fight. And then it's like it's the championship, whatever game. And they're like, you got to go fight this guy because he hurt our other guy or something. I don't remember. I haven't seen it in years. And I shan't be watching it again unless I review it for my channel, which can be really funny. But at one point, he's like, all right, I'm going to go. So he and the guy from the other team, they're out on the ice and they're kind of shadow boxing. And the team thinks he's about to throw a punch. And then he's like, just grabs the guy in a big old bear hug. And he's like, I'm not going to fight anyone. I'll hug every one of you. And then he goes into the song, oh, hockey, the greatest game in the, and I'm just, and it's all these hockey players in their full things dancing on the ice with their hockey sticks. I'm just like, this is why people make fun of Canada, because of shit like this.
That's embarrassing.
It's also horrible.
It also sounds like it was made by someone that doesn't like hockey.
Yeah, like, maybe.
Because I mean, I haven't seen it, but just you describing it, just like, yeah, I'm gonna have hockey, and then people are gonna break out into a song about hugs and not violence. I'm like, do you like this sport? Like, what? Why are you doing this?
Please, will you do me a favor? Sometime this evening, will you watch the trailer and send me your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'll definitely check out the trailer. I got to see some footage of this.
It's
for sure.
The trailer is going to make you laugh your face off. I guarantee
sounds it. Awful. I'm assuming this is like a pretty low budget thing.
I think so. Yeah.
Did it have some money to it? Like, did it look like a real movie, or was it just some jabronis with a camera?
Well, I mean, sliding scale, Canadian cinema. A lot of times it doesn't look quite like American cinema.
Mm.
I mean, it certainly didn't look like a Cronenberg movie, but it didn't look like it was shot in like a high school basement either.
Okay. I wanted to see if it was like on best of the worst level, like shitty video quality.
No. It's
Okay,
not. It's
all right.
not that. I mean, it's a
Okay,
terrible movie, but it's not. I mean, the production design, all that is certainly competent for sure.
okay. I'm excited to at least watch a trailer.
Okay, I look forward to your thoughts very much. All right, so favorites, you're up.
Yeah. I this one actually saw not too long ago for the first time, but I think that I it's just stuck with me. It's 1979's All That Jazz
Okay,
by Bob Fosse. Bob Fosse, for people that might sound familiar, before he was a filmmaker, he was like one of the dance choreographers for Broadway and for Hollywood musicals. Like that he just kind of started as a dancer, then he became a dance choreographer, and then just worked his way up to filmmaker. And this movie, which already off the bat might turn people off, but it really reminds me like of Federico Fellini's 8.5, because it's like this very meta, extremely meta film about a filmmaker who's also a dance choreographer, going through kind of like this midlife crisis. Now, that on paper that would sound really self-indulgent and really pretentious, but it's so not, because it's really like it's almost like a self roast. Like it's really kind of just poking fun at himself, Bob Fosse, um, while having these amazing numbers and amazing scenes. Oh, were you gonna say something?
nope.
Oh, you just took a breath. Okay, so it stars Roy Scheider from Jaws,
Mhm.
and like I said, he plays like It's his name's not Bob Fosse, but his name's Joe Gideon, but it's very clearly like an avatar for Bob Fosse, and it's essentially just his life. Like he's middle aged at this point. He's kind of pushing 60, smoking like 12 packs a day, drinking hardcore. He is never faithful to any woman that he's with. He has a tenuous relationship with his daughter. And the entire time it's just kind of intermixed with like the work that he's doing, like an actual show that he's trying to put on, but also like these weird dream sequences of kind of like his life. It's wild. It's a really funny movie. It's a really beautifully made film. Like I said, I can understand how on paper it can kind of sound like, well, that sounds really self-indulgent, like so meta, it's about yourself. But it so does not take its main character seriously, that it's like, I don't know. It's really really terrific. I highly recommend it. Also, even though it's quite long, for people who are not necessarily big musical fans, it's not like your traditional musical where everyone just kind of breaks out into a song every 5 minutes. There are songs in it and people do break out into numbers, but it's kind of interspersed. Like there's some pretty real and heavy drama that takes up most of it. So I'd say it's more drama than musical, but when it has the numbers, it really goes all out.
Okay,
So All That Jazz.
and I imagine Bob Fosse is the Fosse Verdon guy.
Yes, correct.
Did you watch that show?
I didn't. I do want to check it out, because it's got Sam Rockwell in it, and he's
Yeah,
always great. So I want to see it. Have you, you
it's
watch it?
him and
Michelle Williams.
Michelle Williams, right? I haven't
Mhm.
watched it either. I've heard it's really good.
Yeah, I do want to check that out. I don't know why
Yeah.
I haven't.
All right, so I'm going to, like I said, I have a bit of a runner up because this wasn't a movie. This only played in Toronto for I think a couple of months. Then it had a short run in London's West End, and I don't think it's ever been done
Mm,
again.
okay.
The Lord of the Rings
Oh.
live stage. It's even hard to maybe call it a musical. It's a live stage production. But there are, I
Uh,
mean, like Lord of the Rings, there are lots of songs and whatever.
mhm.
And it was not critically received very well. I saw it twice. I thought it was
Uh,
really cool. I mean, certain performances, the guy playing Gandalf, I didn't like him. The guys playing the hobbits were all good,
uh,
but as a visual spectacle, I've said this about the show many times. I've never seen something that cool live in front of my face.
wow.
Like they built this crazy stage that had something like 60 different elevators in it, so they
Mm,
could create like castles out of the stage that was constantly moving and changing, and
nice.
created the mountain of Mount Doom and all this. It was really, really cool.
Mm.
And the whole Balrog thing, which was the end of Act One. I remember like the cast is all fleeing and Gandalf's there, and you shall not pass. And they basically like just, I guess, a trap door in the stage opens, and this huge, I guess, was like an inflatable kind of dragon thing, just like pops up, and they're blowing like hot air and like fake ash in your face, and it was crazy. And the guy who played Gollum, this Canadian actor named Michael Terrio, guy was amazing, like an acrobat. They had him literally crawling along a proscenium arch and doing
Mhm.
backflips and all this kind of stuff. It was really cool. Um,
That sounds awesome.
it was
I think I've heard of that. I think I remember at some point hearing like Peter Jackson or some of the cast and crew talking about it, but I've
okay.
never actually seen it. I want to see if there's like some footage I can check out of it online.
You can see a little bit on YouTube. There's not a
Uh,
lot, but you can see a bit, and you can get an idea of some of the songs. And yeah, it was really cool. Um, my other runner up, I didn't pick this because you and I have gushed about it in the past on the show, but Book of Mormon is just so good.
yeah. Hmm.
But my favorite musical of all time, and I think I have mentioned it on the show before as well, Little Shop of Horrors. It's
Oh
just,
yeah,
it's a Frank Oz movie. It
man.
stars Steve Martin and Rick Moranis. They're both great in it. Of course, it's about, you know, an alien man eating plant, as voiced by Levi Stubbs from the Four Tops, might I add, which
Mm,
is great.
mm,
And it's all set to doo-wop music. Like,
yeah.
I'm in. That's it. That's it for me.
It's such a great blend of, kind of traditional musical theater, kind of the corniness of it. There's a bit of that charm, but it's also really funny. I mean, you have
Mhm,
Steve Martin as this demented dentist,
mhm.
and the songs are so catchy. That's a great choice. I do love that movie a lot.
Yeah. And it's interesting. My good friend Josh, his uncle Avery, I don't remember if it was on Broadway or not, but his uncle
Mhm.
Avery originated the role of Seymour.
No way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
That's really cool. Wow, small world, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's such an interesting concept for it because it's like it took this kind of obscure B movie from the 50s from Roger Corman that wasn't a musical, but it was, ostensibly the same plot of a guy getting a killer plant. And then who, I don't know who, but someone's like, that'd make a good musical, and good on him because it's really good. Yeah, I think it's one of those movies where I think even people that don't typically like musicals will like this. It's tongue in cheek enough
Mhm.
that it's funny and entertaining. Also, that puppet is fucking killer. That it's
Amazing.
so good. Like I don't know how they articulate the giant lips that well, but it's really terrific.
Now, do you know do you know about the original ending or
Yeah, yeah, because I've seen it. I used to have a DVD of it where they had a Godzilla style ending
yeah.
of a giant plant, like just I don't know what city it was. Maybe it was New York, but just kind of
Oh, it was New York,
destroying
yeah.
it. Yeah,
I think there were two or three of them, yeah.
which is it's a visually cool ending. What do you think? Do you think that it was the right choice to kind of cut that?
I mean, I'm okay with it because the original movie, and spoilers, it's like 40 years old.
Yeah.
Um, the original movie kind of sets it up in a way like, it's a happy ending, but then you see like the baby
Hmm.
plants in their lawn.
Mm.
I'm kind of a fan of the darker ending
Yeah.
just because it's such an out there movie anyway. Like, I didn't need to have a super happy ending. I guess test audiences just didn't like the end, so they
Yeah.
reshot it. But I don't know. And I love the spectacle of the giant plants just destroying New York City. I love
Oh,
it.
I mean, yeah, you know me, like I'm a massive Godzilla fan. So I love that we still have that footage to look at. I don't know if it's still true because I know that reshoots are like they happen all the time. But for a while, that ending sequence would always come up when people would talk about like the most expensive deleted scenes because it was just pretty much all spectacle, or it was all special effects at that point. I think it was like around 2 million. I could
Okay.
be wrong, but it was 2 million, but 2 million in what, like 1985 bucks.
Right.
So like for inflation, that's it. I don't know. Like I said, I'd have to double check to see where it ranks now, but for a while it was such like a I'm surprised they even did cut it because it was just so costly and so
Right.
time consuming just to make it the first time.
I'm just looking up. I don't know if this is still happening. It looks like it is. There's a remake. coming along from director Greg Berlanti. Why do I know that name?
He does like comic book stuff, doesn't he?
He did Love, Simon. He did Green Lantern. He was a producer on the Flash show, the Arrow show. Yeah, okay. So he kind of ran I guess the CW stuff.
The Arrowverse.
Right. Um, so it's coming.
I'm not opposed to. I'll say this: I'm not opposed to remakes off right off the bat, especially because we just mentioned that technically speaking, well, it's not really a remake, but the musical itself is a adaptation, is it of a movie.
Mhm.
So it was already a revamping of a movie from the 50s. So I think it would be kind of hypocritical of me to be like, I'm against another reimagining of it. You know what I mean? What are your thoughts on a remake?
My logic is if the remake sucks, I have the original. It's all good. If the remake's great, cool. I got a great new movie. Here's the cast though.
Yeah, I just pulled that up too because I did actually hear about this. So go for it.
So in the role of Audrey, we have Scarlett Johansson, Oren Scrivello, who's the Steve Martin crazy dentist. We have Chris Evans, and Seymour Krelborn, who is the Rick Moranis role. We have Taron Egerton from, of course, Kingsman. I don't know if any of them can sing, although I think Taron Egerton did his own singing.
Taron can sing for sure.
He did that in Rocket Man, right?
Yeah. Scarlett Johansson has kind of like a husky singing voice, which is nice, but the role of Audrey, I forget what let me look up who the original actress is.
I'm blanking on her name.
Because there's it's Suddenly Seymour is a song that she sings where she just fucking belts it, you know, like, and I'm like, now looking at that cast, I'm thinking, can Scarlett Johansson reach those high notes? I mean, that's not just like, that's not easy to do.
Granted, they could always pitch it down, change the key or something to be more in her register, but
yeah,
I'm just curious. I'm just curious because she isn't that bizarre. She had that like really weird voice in the original. I wonder if she's gonna go for that.
Yeah, no, Ellen Green is she's terrific in the original role because she's also like a stage actress, like a musical theater actress, so she has the singing. So I don't know how I feel about Scarlett Johansson. What I will say though is it's interesting that they have Billy Porter, because the most recent stage production that I saw of Little Shop of Horrors did kind of what I think is becoming a more kind of traditional, how do I say it? Not traditional. It's becoming more of a tradition to do, is that Audrey 2 in the stage show starts off as like a puppet, but then to kind of anthropomorphize it for some songs, they have either a trans actor or someone in drag come out. So it's like, which really makes sense. And once you see it, it's just like, that makes perfect sense, because Audrey 2 is like this larger than life glam rock drag rock star, and it's fucking awesome. So I'm like, okay, I can actually see Billy Porter as Audrey 2, the plant. Whether we actually see him or if it's just his voice, because the dude's got a killer voice actually as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much the show. I don't know. Yeah, I'll check out this new version though, if it ever actually ends up happening. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, so that is the show for this week. Far as we're aware, Chris, Andris, and myself will be back next week. I'm sure we'll talk Loki. What else is coming out this week? The new Pixar movie Luca, which I have seen. I can't talk about it yet, but by the time we do the show next week, it'll be out. So I'm sure we'll do a spoilers review of that. In the meantime, Chris, where can people follow you online?
You can follow me on Instagram. My handle is Art of Light and Shadow. Just a daily film blog of everything that I'm watching, but we also do some fun things. Like right now I'm doing a Best Director movie tournament. It's all user submitted. It's all user voting. A lot of great fun feedback from everybody. So yeah, if you're interested, check it out. Art of Light and Shadow.
And you can check out Andris on YouTube. Do a search for Cheap Thrills, Unspeakable Terror. He reviews sort of horror and sci-fi movies from, and I always try and get this right, from the dawn of cinema up to the modern era. I like his reviews. They're short, they're to the point, and he kind of sounds like Rod Serling, so that's cool. Obviously, you're already on my channel, although if you haven't subscribed, I'd sure love you if you did. You can check me out on Instagram at Courtshake, as well as on Twitter at Courtshake. Again, want to remind you guys that you can find this podcast in its audio-only versions on Google Podcasts, Spotify, a few other places. Hopefully, it's coming to Stitcher and Apple Podcasts soon. We want to thank you guys again for watching. We'd like to encourage you to hit the like button. Again, it helps the video get out there, helps the channel grow. Obviously, jump into the comments below and give us your thoughts on anything we've talked about here today. And am I missing anything, Chris? I think that's all of it.
No, you covered it, man.
All right. So thank you guys very much for watching. We will see you guys next week, and have a great, healthy weekend.
Stay safe.
It's not the weekend.
Have
What am I?
a great week.
Have a great and healthy week.
Let's get out of here before it just collapses.
Let's just stop. All right. Take care, guys.